Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at the power of silence and the art of setting healthy boundaries. Two things that you might not think go together, but we're going to see if maybe they do.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? One is about our inner world, and the other is about how we interact with the world around us. But both of them are really important for our well-being.
It's like you can't have a beautiful garden without a fence around it, right? You need those boundaries.
Exactly.
So let's start with silence. I have to admit, in our world today where everything's always so loud and busy, the idea of being silent, well, it seems kind of impossible.
I know what you mean.
Hmm.
But research shows that silence is so much more than just not having any noise. It's powerful, for personal growth and even for our brains.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
There's studies that show that silence can reduce stress and improve your sleep, and it can even help your brain work better.
Really? I mean, I feel like I can barely get through breakfast without my phone buzzing or someone needing something.
It makes sense, though. When there's so much noise around us all the time, our brains are working overtime. They're
Yeah.
trying to process all that information.
Right.
It's like running a marathon with no break.
Hmm.
But silence gives your brain that break it needs so it can function better.
So you're saying it's like hitting the reset button for your mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's even evidence that silence can actually help your brain grow. There was a study back in 2013, I think.
Oh, wow.
It found that spending just 2 hours a day in silence, could you believe that? 2 hours. It can actually lead to new brain cell growth in the hippocampus.
2 hours.
Yeah, the hippocampus, that's the part of brain that's responsible for learning and memory. So silence might actually be making you smarter.
That's amazing. Okay, you've sold me on silence, but let's be realistic. How do we actually find silence in our busy world? It's not like we can just snap our fingers and make everything quiet, right?
You're right. It's not about finding perfect silence all the time.
Okay.
It's more about being intentional, about creating those pockets of quiet in your day,
Hmm.
and even 5 minutes here and there. That can make a big difference.
Okay, that sounds more manageable, but
Yeah.
where do I even start?
You can start small. Think about how you can incorporate silence into your routine.
Okay.
Maybe you can wake up 5 minutes earlier,
Okay.
have a few minutes of quiet time, but before you grab your phone and start scrolling.
Right.
How about a silent walk during your lunch break?
Hmm.
Could you turn off the radio during your commute and just enjoy the quiet?
Ooh, I like that one.
There's little opportunities all around us if we're just open to them.
That's a really cool way to think about it. So silence, it's good for our well-being. It can boost our brain power. But what about our relationships? I mean, isn't good communication all about talking?
Communication is super important, but silence is a part of communication too.
Okay.
It's like a form of active listening.
Hmm.
It's not just about being quiet. It's about truly tuning in to what the other person is saying
Yeah.
and even what they're not saying.
So it's like paying attention to the spaces between the words.
Exactly. You're creating a space of receptivity where you can really hear what the other person is trying to say, not just with their words, but with their body language, their tone of voice.
So we can get a deeper understanding of what they're trying to communicate.
Yes. And when you're attuned to all of that, you can respond to them in a more sensitive way.
Hmm.
You're less likely to accidentally say something that might hurt their feelings.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like silence can help us become more aware, not only of ourselves, but of everyone around us. And that awareness, that seems really important when we're talking about consent and boundaries in our relationships.
Exactly. It's like silence sharpens our senses.
Hmm.
It helps us become more receptive to everything that's happening in our interactions with others.
I'm starting to see how this all connects. We become more aware of ourselves and others through silence,
Right.
and that helps us navigate those tricky waters of consent and boundaries.
It's all connected like threads in a beautiful tapestry.
This is already blowing my mind. So we've talked about how silence is like a superpower for our brains and how it can help us communicate better. But you mentioned that it can also be healing. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, silence can be healing because it creates space for us to connect with ourselves, those deeper parts of ourselves.
Okay.
The parts we often ignore in our busy lives.
Right.
When we embrace silence, we give ourselves permission to feel all of our emotions,
Mm.
even the ones that are uncomfortable. And that's essential for healing old wounds.
So we're allowing ourselves to feel and process everything that's going on inside.
Exactly. And when you do that, you can start to heal. And that healing can have a positive impact on your relationships too.
Interesting.
As you become more whole and balanced within yourself, you're able to show up differently in your relationships. You
Yeah.
can be more authentic and loving in your interactions.
But that's such a beautiful way to think about it. It's like as we heal ourselves, we're also healing the relationships around us.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Yeah. This is amazing. It's like a beautiful cycle. Embracing silence leads to healing, which helps us set healthy boundaries and build stronger relationships.
And all of that can lead to a more fulfilling life.
This has been so insightful. We've just scratched the surface here, but before we move on, I want to make sure our listeners are with us. Silence can be a little intimidating, right? So do you have any practical tips for actually incorporating it into our lives?
Well, remember, you don't have to become a monk and live in total silence to benefit from it. It's about those small, consistent steps.
Okay.
Even a few minutes each day can make a big difference.
So what's the first step?
I recommend creating what I call no-tech zones.
Okay.
These are spaces where you intentionally disconnect from your devices.
So no phones, no laptops, no TV,
Exactly.
and you just allow yourself to be.
Yes.
I love that idea. It's like creating a sanctuary for your mind.
And you don't have to make it complicated. It could be something as simple as turning off your phone for an hour in the evening or
Okay.
making one room in your house a tech-free zone.
That's totally doable.
The goal isn't perfect silence all the time.
Okay.
It's about becoming aware of the opportunities for silence that are already there in your life.
Right. It's a shift in perspective.
Exactly. And if you pay attention, you'll be surprised how much silence you can find in the most unexpected places.
It's not just about the absence of noise.
No.
It's about the presence of something much deeper, a connection to ourselves, to others, to the world around us.
Beautiful. Now, I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about setting boundaries.
Okay.
Because setting healthy boundaries, that really starts with understanding ourselves and our needs.
So silence is like the foundation.
Yes, it is. And we'll dive deeper into that right after the break.
We'll be right back with more on how to set and respect boundaries in our relationships. Stay with us. So before the break, we were talking about how we can find more silence in our lives. And you said that being comfortable with silence can actually help us set boundaries.
That's right. It helps us build a good foundation for those healthy boundaries. It all comes back to self-awareness.
So you're saying that the more we understand ourselves and our needs,
Yes.
the better we'll be at communicating those boundaries to others.
Exactly. It's like, if you don't know where your own fence posts are,
Okay.
how can you expect others to respect your property lines?
Right, right. But how do we even figure out where our fence posts are in the first place? I mean, how do we know what our boundaries are?
It's all about paying attention to how you feel.
Okay.
Like, what are those situations that make you feel uncomfortable or drained?
Uh-huh.
What topics or activities do you just not have the energy for? Those are all clues.
Okay.
They're signs that maybe a boundary needs to be set.
So it's about listening to our bodies and our emotions. Like if I notice that I feel really stressed out whenever a certain friend calls,
Yes.
maybe that's a sign that I need to set some boundaries in that relationship.
Exactly. Those feelings, they're like a compass, you know?
Mhm.
They're guiding you toward what you need,
Okay.
what you need to feel safe and
Mhm.
respected.
Okay. So once we start paying attention to how we feel, then we can start setting some boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries that protect your energy and well-being.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about actually talking about boundaries with other people? That's where I think a lot of us get stuck.
I understand.
It can feel awkward.
It can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be this big, dramatic thing.
Okay.
Start small
Okay.
and just be direct, but kind.
So how do I do that? Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Let's say you have a friend who's always calling you late at night
Okay.
to vent about their problems, and you always feel drained afterward.
Uh-huh.
You could say something like, hey, I really care about you and want to support you,
Okay.
but it's hard for me to have these conversations late at night. Would it be okay if we talk earlier in the day?
Okay, so you're being assertive, but you're not being mean.
Right. You're stating your needs, but you're also acknowledging their feelings.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might need to just say no.
Directly.
Yes, if someone asks you to do something you're not comfortable with,
Uh-huh.
just say, I'm not able to do that right now, or that's not something I'm comfortable with. You don't always have to give a long explanation.
So it's about putting my needs first.
And respecting your own limits. And remember, this is an ongoing process.
Okay.
Setting boundaries, it's not a one-time conversation.
So we might need to adjust our boundaries as things change.
Exactly. As your needs and your circumstances change.
Makes sense.
And it's just as important to respect other people's boundaries.
Okay.
Even if we don't fully understand them, everyone has their own needs.
Right.
And their own comfort levels.
So boundaries aren't about right or wrong.
No.
It's about respecting individual differences.
And building relationships based on respect.
I'm loving this conversation.
Me too.
It's amazing to see how everything connects, silence, boundaries, well-being.
It really is. They all come together to help us live more mindfully.
And, our listeners are probably eager to hear more about how to actually put all of this into practice.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about some practical strategies for incorporating silence and boundaries into our lives.
Sounds good.
So where do we begin? What's the first step to inviting more silence into our busy lives?
Just remember, start small
Okay.
and be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to change your whole life overnight.
Okay.
A few minutes each day.
Okay.
That's all it takes.
I think a lot of people get intimidated by the idea of silence. They think it has to be this big, elaborate thing.
Right.
But it sounds like it's really more about finding those little pockets of quiet throughout the day.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to do that.
Like what?
You could try waking up 5 minutes early.
Hmm.
Just sit quietly with a cup of tea before your day starts.
Oh, I like that.
What about a silent walk during your lunch break? Or you could turn off the radio during your commute and just enjoy the quiet.
I love that one. It's like
Yeah.
giving your mind a break from all the noise.
Exactly. Look for those opportunities.
Okay.
They're all around us.
So it's not about adding more to our to-do list.
No, not at all.
It's about becoming aware of what's already there.
Yes. And you'll be surprised how much silence you can find, even in the most unexpected places.
I like that. It's not just about the absence of noise. It's about connecting with something deeper.
A connection with ourselves, with others.
And with the world around us.
Exactly. And keep that connection in mind as we talk about setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Because setting healthy boundaries starts with understanding ourselves and what we need.
So silence really is the foundation.
Yes, it is.
I'm so excited to learn more about boundaries after the break.
You too. We'll be right back with some practical strategies for setting and respecting boundaries in our relationships. Stay with us.
So before the break, we were talking about how important silence can be, and you were saying that it can actually help us when it comes to setting boundaries.
It's true. The more comfortable we are with silence and the better we understand ourselves, the stronger that foundation is for setting healthy boundaries.
It all goes back to self-awareness, right?
Really does.
So once we know what our needs are and where our limits are, we're in a better place to communicate those boundaries to other people.
Absolutely. If you don't know where your own fence posts are, how can you expect others to know where your property lines are?
That's such a great way to put it. But how do we actually figure out where those fence posts are?
It starts with paying attention.
Okay.
Paying attention to how you feel in different situations.
Okay.
What makes you feel uncomfortable or drained, or what are those activities or topics that you just don't have the energy for?
Uh-huh.
Those are all clues.
Oh.
They're telling you that maybe a boundary needs to be set.
So it's like our bodies and our emotions are giving us these signals.
Yes.
Like if I feel anxious every time a certain friend calls me,
Exactly.
that could be a sign that I need to create some boundaries in that relationship.
It's like you have this inner compass that's guiding you towards what you need.
Okay.
What you need to feel safe and respected.
I like that. So once we start paying attention to our feelings, then we can start creating some boundaries.
Boundaries that protect your energy
Okay.
and your well-being.
But how do we actually talk about boundaries with other people? I feel like that's the hardest part.
I get it. It can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be this big confrontation.
Okay.
Just start small and be direct, but kind.
Okay, so what does that look like? Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you have a friend who always calls you late at night
Okay.
to vent about their problems, and you end up feeling drained and you can't sleep.
Right.
You could say something like, hey, I really care about you and I want to be there for you, but it's hard for me to focus on these conversations late at night. Would it be okay if we could chat earlier in the day?
Okay, so you're being assertive.
All right.
But you're not being mean or aggressive.
Exactly.
You're just expressing your needs,
Yes.
but in a kind way.
And sometimes you might need to just say no.
Straight up.
Yeah, if someone asks you to do something you're not comfortable with,
Uh-huh.
you can say, I'm not able to do that, or I'm not comfortable with that. You don't always have to explain yourself.
Okay. So it's about honoring my own needs first.
Yes, and respecting your own limits.
Okay.
And remember, this is an ongoing process.
Okay.
You might need to adjust your boundaries as things change.
Right. Like as our needs change or our situations change.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that we need to respect other people's boundaries too.
Okay.
Even if we don't understand them.
Right.
Everyone's different.
Uh-huh.
They have their own needs and their own comfort levels.
Boundaries aren't about being right or wrong.
Nope.
It's all about respecting individual differences.
And building relationships based on mutual respect.
This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about silence, boundaries, and how they all fit together.
It's amazing how interconnected it all is, isn't it?
It really is.
Silence, boundaries, well-being,
It's all part of creating a more mindful and intentional life.
and a more compassionate world.
Thanks for joining us today on this deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of silence and boundaries helpful and inspiring.
Remember, even small steps can make a big difference. Try incorporating a few minutes of silence into your day or setting one small boundary this week. You might be surprised at the impact it has on your life.
Until next time, keep diving deep.